Just want to thank everyone for being on today for my case study. So like Kathy said, my name is Simon Abisoye. I'm a security consultant with Hanabyte. You can see our logo here. So Hanabyte, we're a consultancy based in Atlanta. We offer a wide range of services from security and compliance advisory to cloud migrations to DevOps and cloud engineering. So I've been with Hanabyte now almost a year. So it'll be a year in July. So coming up on my 1 year. And the reason why I wanted to speak today was on a project that I've been working on, which was a WAF deployment for one of our clients that was battling a real estate scam. And so I just kind of wanted to talk about some of the preconceptions that I had going into it about what it meant to deploy a WAF, sort of some of the issues that came up and what I've learned, because this is an ongoing project. So sort of what I've learned along the way over the last few weeks on, what all goes into deploying a WAF. So it's been quite a journey. So I just wanted to kind of come and talk about that. And so I guess just to kind of kick it off, I'm curious, I want you to kind of picture yourself. If you've ever hosted a party, have you ever been, familiar with the concept of, a guest who wouldn't leave or overstays their welcome and is, they can't really take a hint? Maybe you've been the host at a party like that, or you've actually been that person. I've been both. So even though it's annoying when someone is sort of in your space, in your home, and doesn't leave when they're supposed to, even though that's annoying, that's actually something that happens every day. And that is called squatting. So if you're not familiar with squatting is where it refers to moving into a property without any legal claim or title to the property. So such a person is squatting, i.e. living on someone else's property without consent from the owner. So the unfortunate thing is, like, depending on where you live, squatters have rights. So I'll kind of paint a scenario for you. So let's say I go on vacation and I have a buddy house sit for me or dog sit for me. And let's say I'm on vacation for, I don't know, 3-4 weeks. And that person that's staying in my house, let's say they move in some of their things and get a utility bill set up in their name. Well, they now have squatters' rights. And so the time frame for it depends, it varies state by state, but for the most part, the time frame for legitimately good squatters' rights is about 7 to 20 years. So obviously the example I just gave was a few weeks, but still, even in that time frame, those couple of weeks, it's going to take a lot of effort for me to get them out of my house. And it's like, life is hard enough as it is. Who wants to deal with that? Right. So I put a note here that if a squatter provides forms of documents, so again, your utility bill, tax document, whether true or falsified, police will not remove them from the property. The property owner would have to take them to court to get the ownership issue resolved. So again, that's just really, it's a big annoyance. And I'm going to show you guys 2 videos because again, this happens every day, particularly where I live in Atlanta. So I'm going to kind of show you these videos and then we'll come back to the case study. So the first video is coming up now.
Now to a Channel 2 Action News investigation. A one-time payment and the house is yours.
No rent, no mortgage. That's the deal being promoted on Instagram. Channel 2 consumer investigator Justin Gray is here. So Justin, the Instagram account clearly says at this point that they have no legal rights to these homes.
Yeah, and George, there is no coded language or effort to conceal what's going on here. So we sent our hidden cameras and a WSB producer in to see what really happens when you show interest in a squatter home. Hey, sir, it's Justin Gray with Channel 2. Are you selling a squatter home right here? You got the keys? Did you talk to JP about the keys? That's how our undercover investigation came to an abrupt end. But let's rewind and go back to how it began with a scroll through Instagram. At first glance, it's just another real estate pro hustling to rent homes on social media.
So you will get a guaranteed 6 months rent free.
But at one-time payment homes, the site makes it clear. These are squatter homes and spells out just what that means in a pinned Insta story.
The company owners will come out, so will the police. The police will tell you it's a civil matter. It's nothing they can do about it. Squatters' rights.
This is a criminal act. This is stealing. It needs to be looked at that way.
Property owners and managers say the squatting problem has exploded over the past year in Metro Atlanta.
It's like I gave away $200,000. This is how I feel.
Michael Holmes used his life savings to buy this DeKalb County home out of foreclosure 8 months ago as a rental property.
It's been a nightmare.
The alleged squatter living inside has filed more than 30 motions in court to tie up Holmes' effort to get him out.
If I can't bring this to some type of resolution, I'll be in jeopardy of filing bankruptcy.
One-time Payment Homes is running a New Year's special, $1,400 for keys and a lease. So as a squatter, you can, quote, stack money and turn your life around.
And it makes you feel like, why do you play by the rules if everyone doesn't have to?
To see how it worked, we sent a Channel 2 producer, JP, undercover.
You're just going to say, I saw your post on Instagram. I'm curious how this process works.
Okay. JP exchanged a series of messages with One-Time Payment Homes over the course of a week and paid his $500 deposit through Apple Pay. That's when we were told to take our pick of any home posted on the real estate website Rently. The CEO of the National Rental Home Council says Atlanta is seeing more squatters than anywhere else in the nation.
We're seeing situations of trespassing in Atlanta that we're not seeing anywhere else in this country in terms of scale.
Back to our house hunt, we settled on a home in Union City. But the day of the meetup, we're told it's off market, but that they do have keys for this house nearby, managed by Progress Residential and also posted on Rently. We were told to meet at a gas station to exchange the rest of our one-time payment for keys. Then we would get an email with the lease.
Hi there. JP, nice to meet you.
But the meetup lasted only seconds.
So how does all this work? Okay. Okay.
As soon as they saw our Channel 2 camera coming, the One-Time Payment Homes representative took off running. Hey, sir, it's Justin Gray with Channel 2. Are you selling a squatter home right here? You got the keys? Did you talk to JP about the keys? But it wasn't the end of the Instagram account. They're still offering move-in deals.
The person that designed that business, if you want to call it a business, is a criminal.
We've reported on multiple squatter horror stories in the past 12 months on Channel 2, like when a squatter moved into Army Colonel Dahlia DeRay's DeKalb home while she was on active duty.
I felt violated.
Police eventually pulled guns and drugs out of her house when they arrested the squatter and served an intruder affidavit, bypassing the regular court eviction process. Property owners say for the problem to stop, courts need to consider squatting as theft, a crime, not a run-of-the-mill eviction case.
We need to talk about this for what it is. This is criminal trespassing. It's a law enforcement issue.
Progress Residential owns the home we were offered the keys to. A spokesperson tells us they have been monitoring the site and have repeatedly appealed to Instagram for its removal. Main Street Renewal owns the first house we were promised and tells us they sent the account a cease and desist letter, also flagged this to Instagram. But as of now, the site remains active and no one with that site responded to my DMs asking for comment.
Wow, this is amazing.
So many layers to it, obviously. The business is, as they said, really is unethical. And the fact that nothing can be done, like you said, unless you escalate.
Squatters' rights.
And Atlanta is #1 in the country for this right now.
Justin, great report.
So I got one more that'll really bring this home.
Begin tonight with the Channel 2 Action News exclusive. We were with deputies today in DeKalb County as they evicted a group of suspected squatters from a home. The owner told us several people broke in last week, changed the locks while he was away caring for his sick wife. Channel 2's Tom Regan is live at Ashton Oak Circle in DeKalb County, where, Tom, I bet the homeowner is relieved to get his property back.
Oh, absolutely, Linda. Take a look over here. You can see the U-Haul there in front of the house. They are packing it with furniture and other belongings that are owned by the people who had been living in the house. Deputies moved in to evict them this afternoon, and the owner is glad to have his property back. Deputies removed locks to gain entry to the house.
Terrorist officer, open up.
whose owners said had been taken over by squatters who claimed to have a legitimate rental lease.
I'm frustrated.
Paul Callens told me he inherited the home from his father when he died of cancer 2 years ago. He renovated it with his own hands and advertised it online for government-subsidized tenants. He said he never signed a lease with those who entered his home without his permission and changed the locks. I tried to get an explanation from a man inside who wouldn't give his name.
The owner of this house says you all broke into his house illegally 9 days ago.
So check this out. I'm about to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
We rented this property.
He says you didn't rent it.
Well, I'm just telling you what we did. I
Okay.
don't know what you know what I mean, what's going on or whatever.
He says there's no lease agreement, there's no rental
There
agreement,
is one
nothing.
on our end, there is one.
Okay, well, it's not on his end and he owns the house.
All right, that's
So
good.
I think he would know if he leased the house to someone.
It has to be a scam, sir.
The homeowner got an intruder affidavit authorizing the sheriff to remove someone living on property without the owner's permission. As movers were clearing out their belongings, he confronted the man.
Y'all broke in my house. I totally understand how you feel about the situation. We didn't break into anything ourselves or anything.
And he wasn't buying the man's claim that he was conned by a phony real estate agent and lease.
I don't believe it. I'm very relieved. You know, I hate that it happened, and I see they got a child, so that's unfortunate for a child to be in that situation.
Deputies didn't arrest anyone who had been living in the house. Georgia lawmakers are nearing passage of the law that would include criminal charges against people that move into homes without the owner's permission and present a phony lease. Live in DeKalb County, Tom Regan, Channel 2, Action News.
I hate to hear about a child in that situation too, Tom, but it's a good thing that the deputies and the sheriff were able to react to the homeowners' concerns. Thank you. Again tonight with the.
All right. So again, it's just really annoying. Like that last guy, those people, they weren't there for even a year. It was just a couple weeks. But just imagine, again, like I said, like life is hard enough as it is. Who wants to deal with that? So I have a quote here. So anyone that's a Spider-Man fan, remember, with great power comes great responsibility. Uncle Ben from Spider-Man. And I feel like this quote really encapsulates like technology in general. Like technology really enhances our lives, but with that great power comes a lot of responsibility because people do nefarious things with it. I went to a conference last week, and one of the panelists, one of the discussions was about whether AI is a threat, opportunity, or both. And one of the panelists who spoke said that, you know, the mindset, he was along the lines that AI is an opportunity. And he said that, you know, we want to encourage AI use, but we just want to make sure everybody's using it the same way. And so one of the rebuttals to that was that that's kind of idealistic in a sense, like, because there's always going to be people who do bad things. And so this quote with squatting kind of, and with my case study really ties in, because part of why this was happening was, I don't know if anyone on here uses smart locks. So back in the day, if you wanted to go view a home, you had to have a real estate agent with you, and they would have a key to a lockbox, and that's how you get into the house. But now you can just use smart locks, which is where you get like a code. You type in the code. The owner of the house can set a code. You type in the code and you get in. And so because of that convenience, that technology, that has led to sort of where an increase in squatting. So I'm gonna now kind of introduce my case study. So the company that I was working with was called Walkin' Now. So Walkin' Now is a company that provides self-guided tours to home shoppers by granting a one-time use code to go into prospective homes. The client uses the code to get access to smart locks. So there's two ways for you to tour. So one way is through your web browser. So you would schedule a tour. So for instance, the next day at 11 o'clock, you get access after receiving a code. And the code is what you would use on the smart lock. The second way is through the app, so iOS or Android, and it would use a geolocation check to make sure you're in front of the property. Once you are, you get a code, and then the app would scan your driver's license to verify your identity. And so the scam for this was that they were essentially breaking into the app and stealing the one-time code. Well, let me back up. So the scam was basically, let's say I'm selling my house with Walkin' Now. So I'm selling my house for $500K. Legitimately, I'm selling my house. But the scammers were essentially breaking into the app and changing the listing to make it seem like my house is for rent, and the rent is like absurdly low. So the example I used was I'm selling my house for 500K legitimately. You are legitimately looking to rent, but you're seeing the listing as the rent is 500. Like no one that owns a $500,000 house would rent out a room for $500. Like you're not going to get rent that low in Atlanta, right? And so the scammers we found out were based in Nigeria. They were infiltrating the app and tricking it by using anonymous IPs and geolocation spoofing. And they were basically stealing that one-time code that I told you about. So the scammer has the code. They would then text the code to the victim. All communication was done through text as the victim was standing outside of the house, and let the victim in. So the victim, again, is going in thinking, okay, wow, this is a really nice house. This is for rent. Okay, cool. I want to rent this. And then the scammers were creating like fake leasing agreements, having them fill out fake application applications. And then we're collecting application fees and deposits via Cash App. So, and then once they got the money, they would take off. So like, I remember when we first had our initial meeting with the client, they shared with us images of like texting that was going back and forth between a client and the scammers. And once the scammers got the money, like the client was texting like, hey, Bill, I'm here with a moving truck ready to move in, but I haven't received keys yet. Hey, Bill, are you still there? Bill, like they got ghosted. And I'm laughing, but it's not funny because people were losing a lot of money because of this. And so you might be looking at this and saying, well, if you're the person that's selling your home through the app, that's kind of negligent. Like, wouldn't you know that people are looking at your house thinking that it's for rent? Like, wouldn't you be, maybe, like, depending on who you are, right? Like, let's say you're someone that you're an investor and you have a lot of investment properties. You probably, maybe you're in another country or you're in another state and you're selling your house. And like, I remember one of my old bosses, she lived in Texas and had a condo here that she would rent out to people, but she didn't live here. So what she would do is she would have her nephew, meet the people that were interested in renting her condo. I think her only stipulation was that they couldn't smoke. And so as long as her nephew gave her the thumbs up, she would go ahead. And so you'd be surprised, again, like with conveniency and technology, how technology makes our lives more convenient, but it also introduces more layers for us, for bad guys to do bad things. And there's a quote that I really like by George W. Bush that says, the enemy has to be right once, we have to be right 100% of the time. And he was talking about the war in Iraq, but you can kind of apply that to like scammers, right? Like, even if this only works like 1 out of 10, all they need is that one time to get money, right? So I just kind of wanted to illustrate that point. And so in this transaction, there's really 3 people that are getting affected. There's the person who's selling their house. So me, that I'm selling my house on the app legitimately. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. I'm legitimately trying to sell my house. I'm getting screwed over. You're getting screwed over because you're getting tricked into, paying rent or signing up for a house that's not legitimately for rent. And the client walking out, they're getting screwed over because their reputation. And then so sort of the squatting rights piece kind of comes in too, because if I just got scammed and paid rent for a house that wasn't legitimately up for rent, I may say, well, you know what, I'm not leaving because I've paid I thought it was for rent, I'm not leaving. So hey, I'm going to set up utilities in my name and move in my stuff. And again, like, will you eventually get me out? Yes. Will it take a few, how long will it take? Who knows? But it's just the annoyance, right? And then you're going to say, I'm not using that app again. That was a mess. I got scammed. So it was a big mess. So again, like 3 entities are getting affected by this. And so as a company, our solution, because Walk In Now was hosting their infrastructure in AWS on an EC2 instance, was to deploy a WAF, a web application firewall. So for those that don't know what a web application firewall is, AWS WAF helps secure your web applications and APIs by blocking requests before they can reach your server. So with a good WAF, you can create security rules that can control bot traffic and also block common attack patterns such as SQL injections or cross-site scripting. So before I go further with this, I want to also say, so Walk In Now, their infrastructure was their setup was interesting in the sense that the back end of their application was hosted in AWS on an EC2 instance, but the front end was hosted on this platform called Netlify, which platform platform developers can use this to build dynamic websites and web applications. So our plan was to migrate their front end from Netlify to use CloudFront in AWS, deploy a WAF on CloudFront, and then also deploy a WAF on the backend portion of on the EC2 instance of their production instance. So now I also want to touch on WAF rules because I think that's really important. So what are managed rule groups? So AWS offers a service when you set up a WAF, and we use this as kind of the foundation, sort of the foundation for our setup in the sense of when you set up WAF rules, the AWS managed rules, just for simplicity's sake, will automatically be updated because obviously as cyber threats change and we have more information, the WAF rules that you set up today may not be relevant tomorrow. So with AWS managed WAF rules, you essentially have security experts who have extensive knowledge of threats and vulnerabilities that create these managed rules and automatically update them. So when they update them, your WAF gets updated as well. So, and I kind of wrote a note about that. So as new vulnerabilities and bad actors emerge and a rule is updated, the web ACL will receive the update automatically. So it just kind of makes things a bit easier from a security perspective. But I also think it's kind of funny, obviously AWS follows the principles of like the shared security model. So AWS, even if you use a managed rule group, they make a point to say like, hey, you're still responsible for security. Like they're responsible, for security of the cloud. You're responsible for security in the cloud. So I just thought that was kind of funny. Like they make it a point to say like, hey, if you get hacked, it's still on you kind of thing. But the point I just want to bring here is that we made a point we wanted to use the AWS WAF managed service for the managed rules because we felt that it would be better to get sort of that streamlined updating of rules. So I kind of wanted to touch on that. And then, so now let me get into how we set up the WAF for Walking Now. So we started off initially with 5 rules as our foundation. So the first one was the managed bot control rule. So that provides protection against automated bots that can consume excessive resources, skew business metrics, cause downtime, or perform malicious activities. We also did the Amazon managed IP reputation list, which contains rules that are based on Amazon's internal threat intelligence. So if you want to block IP addresses that are typically associated with bots or other threats, and it can mitigate against malicious actors that discovering like a vulnerable application. The third one that we set up was the anonymous IP list. So this contains rules to block requests from services that permit obfuscation of basically when someone tries to hide their identity online. So like VPNs, proxies, web hosting providers, etc. So it's useful if you want to filter out viewers that may be trying to hide their identity from your application, which would be very useful in our case. And then the fourth one we set up was the CRS, so core rule set, which this basically contains rules that are generally applicable to web applications. So it gives you protection against a wide range of vulnerabilities, but specifically vulnerabilities that have been identified in the OWASP top 10. And then the known bad inputs. So these contain rules that block patterns that are known to be invalid and associated with exploitation or discovery of vulnerability. So, we felt that this was a really good defense in-depth strategy for Walking Now's app. And so this was kind of the foundation that we started off with. Now, unfortunately, and I kind of spoke to this in the beginning, it sounds really simple, right? So like it's funny too, because like when you're learning any type of cloud provider, so whether it's AWS, GCP, Azure, et cetera, and if you go on YouTube and you type in, how to spin up an EC2 instance, how to create a VPC, how to create a security group, how to create a Lambda function, how to do you'll either get a class, right, on Udemy or you'll find a video on YouTube, and they make it very simple, which they should, right? So like AWS WAF, they pride themselves on this service of saying how easy it is to deploy. But it's a lot more complicated than that. And that's kind of the first thing that I learned is that, you know, so much of what we do might seem very simple in the initial stages when you're kind of planning it out, but you're going to hit a lot of road bumps along the way. And one of the first ones that I hit was the application load balancer. So remember I said that the back end of Walking Now was hosted on an EC2 instance. Bro, you can't just apply a WAF to an EC2 instance. You have to apply the WAF to an application load balancer and put the load balancer in front of the EC2 instance. Well, the problem was this client already had a load balancer set up in Nginx. So we had to figure out a way to make the AWS load balancer and the Nginx load balancer communicate. And so one of the first issues that I ran into was, so I'm sure everyone knows what a target group is. So a target group is like a logical grouping of instances that a load balancer sends traffic to. So your target group, you want it to have a healthy status. And so when I initially set up the target group, when I was trying to get Nginx and AWS to communicate, my target group was coming up as unhealthy. It was failing its health check. And so the reason why and what I had to do was I had basically had to SSH into the instance and essentially do an Nginx configuration to listen on to do a listener on port 80. And also I had to configure the target group's protocol to be HTTPS instead of HTTP. So that's very interesting because like if you were to Google or look up on YouTube a tutorial on how to deploy a WAF or how to create an application load balancer, they're all going to tell you to create do your target group protocol on HTTP. But I had to pivot, right? So I couldn't just go off of what everyone else was saying. I had to specialize my deployment to this specific client. So that was one of the first issues, and that was very challenging to do. So, and I have here, I just wanted to kind of show the Nginx configuration. So this was the initial configuration. So you have a SSL configuration here, the SSL certificate, and you have a listener on port 443. But I then had to configure this to include a listener for port 80. And that by doing that, it enabled my target group to have a healthy status and I could proceed. So now the second issue was having a forwarded IP. So I wish I could kind of diagram this out, but just kind of follow me. So when you have a virtual machine, you have a client, the client's trying to hit the virtual machine, you put a load balancer in front of the virtual machine. When clients are trying to hit that virtual machine, the traffic is first going to hit the load balancer. The load balancer is going to terminate the traffic and then reissue it to the virtual machine. So what ends up happening is the client's initial IP address gets terminated at the load balancer, and it's the load balancer's IP address that you would see on the log side. So Walking Now's leadership wanted to be able to see the original client IP address in their web server access logs. And so after the WAF was implemented, they weren't able to see that. They were only seeing the load balancer logs. And so again, we have to tailor our approach to what the client needs. And so what ends up happening is there's something called an X forwarded for header. And it's, I have the definition down here. It's a standard request header for identifying the originating IP address of a client connecting to a web server through a proxy server. So essentially what happens is when you implement that, you'll see essentially the client's original IP address gets appended and you'll see that in the logs. But the first solution was to implement that on the AWS side. And in doing an AWS is really simple. I mean, you literally just have to go into your load balancer configuration and choose append for X forwarded for, but that still didn't work. So what we realized was it was an Nginx issue. So if I come back here, you can see in Nginx, proxy set header X forwarded for, and we had to configure this. And like, I know I'm kind of saying it really nonchalantly, like, oh, well, we just had to go into Nginx and do some configuration, but Nginx isn't the most, as you can see, like user-friendly, and it's really easy to break an entire system. Like one wrong move, Nginx is really unforgiving. So, and I'm going to kind of get to this at the end with my lessons learned, but well, I'll hold off on that. But yeah, so essentially that's what we had to do to get past that second issue. So that was that. Now, the third issue. So once the WAF was deployed, we then realized that mobile traffic was being blocked. And so after analyzing the WAF logs, we realized that the bot control rule set was blocking mobile traffic. So if you, when you dig a little deeper into the bot control rule set, there's a particular rule called the signal non-browser user agent specification. And basically, and I'm going to show you guys the screenshot of this in a second. It says, if you expect mobile or non-browser traffic, you need to add exceptions to your bot control implementation to allow that traffic through. So what I ended up doing was I sent a post request and I received a 403 error in return. So I was able to confirm that, yes, mobile traffic was being blocked. So this is a really quick fix. All I had to do was, there's two ways. Either one, I could edit this rule to be in count mode as opposed to block mode. So it would just, or allow mode. So, which is what I did. So allowing mobile traffic in, or I could do an exception rule to the bot control rule, which would allow and set the priority for that rule higher because in a WAF, it takes the rules in order. So I'm going to show you guys that too in a second, sort of the hierarchy of the rules. So if you put a rule above the offending block rule, it'll allow that traffic through. So this is probably a good point too. And I'm going to get to this at the end to kind of talk about like some of the mistakes I made in this implementation, because anyone that's like experienced with WAF would probably say, well, Simon, you know, a lot of that issue really could have been mitigated if you had just done if you had implemented the WAF in count mode first and analyze logs, figure out what traffic is coming through, and then implement follow-ups to your WAF. And you would be absolutely right. So I want to kind of go into the WAF rules or the WAF. So there's accept, block, and count. So accept means that traffic is accepted on that rule. Block means that WAF will block the request, but count means that WAF doesn't block the request, but it counts it. So it'll say, okay, normally this traffic would have been blocked, but we allowed it through. But it allows you to then go back as the implementer and analyze your logs and say, okay, so this would have been blocked. Is this a false positive? Yes or no? And go from there. So that was, and I'll get to that in my lessons learned, but that was something that I learned as well. Count mode is your friend. And initially when deploying a WAF, in my opinion, it's better to kind of, instead of going straight into block mode, go into count mode first for a specific, even if you're, I know like it can be tempting because you want to implement the WAF because the bad guys are getting through, but it's beneficial, I feel, to do count mode first, do your analysis, and make so that way you're not blocking out legitimate traffic, essentially. So that was the third issue I ran into. And I just wanted to show you guys, this is an actual WAF log, and this is me getting blocked. So, and this is where I was able to confirm that, yes, mobile traffic was being blocked. And obviously, that's a problem I mean, you can't block mobile traffic, right? I mean, most people, I think more people browse the internet or use their phone more than they do their computer. So, I mean, you can't block. So that's a big deal. And so I just kind of wanted to show you guys the WAF log for that. You can see where it was blocked, and you can see it's a managed rule group like I talked about, and you can see the actual the bot control rule set there. And then these are the rules that we initially set up, our foundational rules. So when I was talking about setting up an exception rule, so what I would have had to, if I wanted to go that way, I would have just created the exception rule and put the exception rule here, and it would be analyzed first before it got to this rule that was blocking. So essentially, what this WAF is saying is, for incoming traffic, analyze, and these are all in block mode, by the way. Analyze all these rules first. If none of the traffic applies to these rules, allow it through, which is what we would have wanted. So when I say count mode, I mean in the rules themselves, not in the default web ACL action. I mean here. So, and then here is the rule that I was saying. So you see, if you expect mobile or non-browser traffic, add exceptions to your bot control implementation to allow that traffic through. So again, like that was a blunder on me, implementing this, deploying this, and missing that. So a lesson learned there. Now, fourth issue that we ran into. So once the WAF was deployed, we're allowing mobile traffic in, everything is good, right? Not necessarily, because so walk-in now, they also have builder clients as well. And so builders were trying to upload their logos on the app for Webflow customization, and they were getting blocked from doing so. And that was a false positive. And the reason why is because in the common rule set manage rule, there's one of the rule stipulations blocks file uploads that have random characters in the metadata, which is a lot of images do, because of their similarity to a cross-site scripting attack. So like a lot, it's funny because, you know, a lot of what the WAF was doing, the WAF was doing its job, but it was doing what I was telling it to do, right? So the WAF is doing its job. Like it thinks that this is a legitimate attack and it's blocking it, but it's a false positive. No, so I had to add an exception rule to allow that through. So that was another issue that we ran into there. And then this is a really good one. So the HTTP library rule. So one of walking out one of their employees was testing the app. So whenever we would deploy the app, whenever we would deploy the WAF, she was the one that would test because we had a lot of issues with the Android app. The iOS app was fine, but the Android app in particular, we had some issues with. So she would be the one that would test it to make sure she could log in, etc. And she was getting blocked with the Samsung phone she was using. And I couldn't figure out why that was. And so it turned out that she was using an older Samsung phone. And I guess older Samsung phones, after I did some research, for some reason, when they make post requests, sometimes they do it under an HTTP header, which the WAF, right? You don't want to allow, that's unsecured traffic. So the WAF is doing its job by blocking that. But we ended up seeing that older Samsung phones make post requests with an HTTP header. Well, in that situation, we need to reevaluate that, because we can't dictate, you know, what phones people use to access their app, right? So that was a situation where if I had deployed the WAF in count mode first, I could have analyzed the traffic and say, okay, we have a few clients that come in that are using HTTP header, or maybe she was the only one and she was just a tester, right? Over a period of like a month, if we were analyzing the logs. So I would have, that's where you make a judgment call with the client that, you know, hey, we don't recommend allowing HTTP header traffic in, but if you feel that it's necessary for your business use case, we can. So that was another issue that we ran into, but I was able to confirm that it was specifically only her. So obviously we ended up blocking that traffic, because as we analyzed the WAF logs, we realized it wasn't a big need. So now my lessons learned and what I would tell myself if I could go back in time. So a WAF deployment is more complicated than I realized. So I wrote a note here, Tom Brady. And the reason why I put that is because like if Tom Brady was here right now and you asked him, hey, Tom, how do you throw a football? You know, he would probably just say, oh, well, you know, you get the ball, you drop back and you pass. But like to do it at a high level in the Super Bowl, when you have defensive linemen that want to take your head off and linebackers, and you have cornerbacks that are the best athletes in the world, it's a lot more difficult. So again, like if you were to Google, you know, a WAF deployment, a lot of the publications that you'll see make it sound really simplistic, and especially a lot of the things that you'll see from AWS. And I'm not trying to fault AWS, like it's a service and they're a business, so that's what they're supposed to do. But the point I'm trying to make is that, you know, things are a lot more complicated than they seem. And so a lot of times, you know, you keep that in mind. And that's something that I'm definitely going to keep in mind going forward, is that, you know, especially with clients, is that it's not quite as simple as it sounds a lot of times when you're deploying something. And so the second thing I learned is that when deploying a WAF, it's always better to be conservative in the initial stages. So kind of what I talked about, you know, when I initially deployed the WAF, I did the rules in a default block mode, right? So essentially, if traffic is coming in that matches any of these rules, block it. And that was a mistake. Even, you know, I was being super aggressive there because I felt like the client needed it. But what I should have done, I should have been a bit more conservative. I should have said, no, that let's deploy this in count mode first. Let traffic, you know, let's see how the traffic, let's analyze the traffic. Let's look at our logs, maybe deploy it in count mode for maybe a month, I don't know, or a couple weeks, and let's analyze and let's see what we have, so we can analyze false positives. We can analyze HTTP headers if that's a needed allow, or if that's a one-off thing, right? So it's just, in my opinion, and going forward, I would say it's just better to be a bit more conservative. You just want to be a bit more analytical and not just do a straight block on everything. Go in the initial stage. Now, once you have the data, and once you've identified false positives, then by all means, block everything else. Have exception rules for your false positives and block everything else. But like that logo issue, like that issue, the HTTP header issue, those are things that I could have caught initially, right? Those didn't have to be where clients are getting blocked and clients are saying, well, what's going on here, right? So, I mean, those are things that I could have mitigated, if I had just been a bit more conservative in my initial deployment. Another thing I learned is that every environment is different and you have to tailor your approach accordingly. So, whether it comes to, a client having an Nginx load balancer already, right? So how do we get these two load balancers to talk to each other, right? There's no, like, one of my colleagues, Robert, he told me one time, he said, you can't look at it and think, oh, you're just going to turn on a light and it's going to work, like, or you're just going to flip a switch and it's going to work. And he's so right. Like, you have to, it's not that easy, right? You have to tailor your approach, and every client is different. So the next client, deploy a WAF on, their environment is going to be completely different than walk-in now. So that's just this client, but the next client could have a completely different, environment that, I have to account for. And so I take the lessons that I learned here, right? But I can't just, apply that to every client going forward for a WAF deployment. So another lesson I learned is that just because the deployment works fine in staging doesn't necessarily mean it's going to translate seamlessly to production. So, before I deployed the WAF, like I initially deployed it in staging, and there were no, like, what I'm trying to say is, before I went to production, I was pretty confident that I was good in staging, and staging is great. And even though staging is a replica, or maybe a replica of prod, you can't always replicate what happens in prod in staging. And so you really have to, you can't look, like, for instance, client traffic, right? Like, you can't just say, oh, well, we're good in staging, so, we're good to go in prod and there'll be no issues. And I put a note here about scout team. So I'm going to use another sports reference. I remember I used to play football when I was in high school, and the week before we played an opponent, we would have scout team. So basically, the opponent that you're getting ready to play, your scout team is members of maybe your second string, and they basically mirror what you're going to see in the game. So let's say you're about to play a quarterback that runs really well. So you're going to have a scout team quarterback all week getting the defense ready for a guy that runs around a lot. But even though scout team does all that, it's still not the same as when you get on the field when it's live. Like, it doesn't matter how good your scout team is, right? Like, it's still not going to be the same. And I feel like staging and production is similar to that. It's like, staging can get you ready, but when you get to production, you're live. Like, it's game time, it's showtime, and staging doesn't always replicate what you're going to see when you go live. So that's something else I would just remember going forward, and also encourage people to, is that, yeah, staging is awesome. You want to, beat up staging, make all your mistakes in staging, but also still be prepared, expect the unexpected when you go to prod. And then another thing I learned is that you may need to learn new skills on the fly. So Nginx, I had no experience with that. And I kind of showed you guys, like, doing an Nginx configuration is not the most user friendly. So, like, I kind of had to, and am still learning that. And so something as simple or as a WAF deployment can lead to other things, and other issues will come up, and you're going to have to try your best to, learn other issues and learn that system as you're trying to fix this system. So, like, you have this problem, and then this problem turns up, and now you have to try to learn this system to try to fix that problem before you can fix this problem. And so yeah, that was something else. And then backup. So before I touched my colleague Mike, I remember before I went into Nginx and started messing with the configuration, he was like, hey, we need to make sure we have a backup of their Nginx configuration before we even touch it, just in case we break anything, or not like if we break anything, but just in case we need to go back and just in case something doesn't work the way we expect it to. And so backups. And like, I know, obviously, you know that, but it's just good. It's a good reminder to always have backups. That actually came in handy because we needed to revert the Nginx when it came time to renew certificates. We needed to revert the Nginx configuration in prod to what it was before we added the listeners on port 80. So backups are so critical. So to kind of wrap up, so you're probably wondering, what's the state of walk-in now right now? Well, right now it's actually pretty good. They've seen a huge reduction in fraud, even though it's still an ongoing project, and we've had some issues as far as the WAF being too aggressive. But even in the WAF being too aggressive, there has been a significant reduction in fraud, which has been really awesome. So once we finish, I believe they'll be good to go. So I have my contact info here if anyone wants to chat more about WAFs. It's been a really cool experience, and yeah, that's my email and also my LinkedIn. So would love to talk more, and that is it. I will stop sharing.